My name is Marlene Grayson. I'm 62 years old. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped through the slot with the rest of the mail. I almost didn't notice it at first. Thick ivory paper, gold trim, the kind that leaves a faint shimmer on your fingertips. When I turned it over, I saw Evan's name embossed beside hers. Evan Grayson and Clara Monroe request the honor of your presence. I smiled before I finished reading. Then my eyes caught the small print near the bottom. Seating groom's side. No mother of the groom, just a line about where to sit. I read it twice. Just to be sure. No mother of the groom. No acknowledgement of who I'd been for 34 years of his life. Just a guest. The ache came quietly, like the soft pull of an old scar. Still, I placed the card carefully on the counter, smoothing the corner that had bent in the mail. I told myself it didn't matter. It was Evan's wedding, and weddings belonged to the young, to the beautiful, to those who hadn't spent decades working double shifts in the emergency ward or eating dinner alone at a small kitchen table. Outside, the late afternoon light spilled across the porch, warm and golden. I made myself a cup of tea and stared at the invitation propped against the sugar jar. The handwriting on the envelope was Clara's, elegant, practiced, impersonal. I pressed my finger to Evan's name, the only part that felt like home, and whispered, "You deserve happiness, sweetheart." Then I folded the invitation back into its envelope and placed it in the drawer beside the old family photos. Tomorrow, I'd have to find something to wear. The morning of the wedding broke heavy and bright, the kind of Charleston heat that clings to your skin before the day even begins. I'd left the windows open overnight, hoping for a breeze, but the air was thick and still. The scent of magnolias drifted in from the street, sweet and heavy as memory. On the ironing board lay my navy dress. It wasn't new, hadn't been for years, but it had a quiet dignity I liked. I'd worn it to Evan's college graduation, the same day I'd watched him walk across the stage and accept the diploma I'd worked half a lifetime to help him earn. I remember standing there, hands trembling, clapping until my palms stung, thinking that every double shift, every missed holiday had been worth it. The iron hissed softly, and for a moment, the sound reminded me of the hospital, the steady rhythm of machines, the hush before a patient woke. There had been so many nights back then when I'd come home after 12 hours on my feet. The house dark except for the faint light under Evan's door. I'd peek in and see him asleep, a math book open beside him, and feel a strange mix of exhaustion and peace. I folded the dress carefully over the back of the chair and moved to the small tin box on my dresser. Inside were old pay stubs, folded bills, and the last of my savings. I'd dipped into it quietly over the past year to help cover the wedding Evan didn't know. He'd think the extra money came from an old insurance policy. That was fine. Some things a mother doesn't need credit for. Outside, a car horn sounded faintly down Wentworth Street. The city was already waking. I looked at the dress one more time, smoothed its collar, and whispered, almost to myself, "Let today be kind." Then I began to get ready. The church bells rang softly through the warm Charleston air as I stepped out of the car, careful not to wrinkle the navy dress. The sun glared off the white marble steps, and for a moment I felt small among all that brightness. Silk dresses, polished shoes, the scent of expensive perfume mixing with the salt of the harbor breeze. Inside, everything gleamed ivory ribbons down the pews, crystal vases catching the light. Clara's family had spared no expense. She looked radiant at the altar, every inch the bride she wanted the world to see. When Evan turned toward her, his face lit up with that same boyish joy I'd once seen when he built sandcastles at the beach, for a heartbeat. I believed this was how it was meant to be. After the ceremony, the guests moved toward the reception hall. I followed slowly, watching the clusters of people in pastel suits and pearl earrings. Someone offered me champagne. I declined. My throat already felt too tight. Clara found me near the corridor leading to the main hall. She was still smiling, the practiced kind that photographs, "Well, Marlene," she said sweetly, her hand brushing my arm. "Could we speak for a moment?" Her perfume was sharp. Citrus and money. She leaned closer. Voice soft enough to sound private, but pitched just loud enough for a few guests to hear. "Honestly," she said, "we invited you out of pity, not love." The words landed like glass shattering quietly between us. I didn't move. For a long second, the air seemed to vanish from the room. A couple nearby looked away too late. Clara's smile never faltered. I felt the sting behind my eyes, the rush of blood to my face, but it passed. I straightened, adjusting the strap of my purse. My voice came out steady, almost gentle. "Thank you for the honesty." Her expression flickered, confusion beneath the polish. I turned, smoothed the skirt of my dress, and walked toward the reception hall. My steps slow, deliberate. The music from inside swelled soft jazz, bright laughter, and I kept walking, my face calm as marble. The reception hall shimmered beneath chandeliers that looked like frozen rain. Laughter spilled across the room, silverware clinking against crystal. Clara moved easily among her guests, radiant under the flash of cameras. Her arm looped through Evan's, watching her from a distance. I saw perfection, sculpted to the last detail, and knew how much of it was a lie. I stood near the back wall, close to the servers carrying trays of champagne. The music was lively, the kind that hides tension beneath its rhythm. My hands were steady around the glass I wasn't drinking from. I'd learned long ago that calm could be louder than rage. Across the room, near the DJ booth, stood Tessa Holt, the event coordinator. She caught my eye for only a second, just long enough for a subtle nod. I'd met her 6 months earlier, when she came through the emergency ward after a car accident fractured wrist, mild concussion. I'd stayed late that night to make sure she had what she needed. Gratitude, it turned out, sometimes lasts longer than pain. We hadn't spoken much since then, only exchanged a few quiet calls and one short meeting at a downtown cafe. Enough to share facts, enough to prepare. Now, watching her adjust the microphone near the dance floor, I saw the flicker of resolve in her face. The files I'd handed her weeks ago, neatly labeled and time-stamped, were no longer just secrets. The band began to tune for the first dance. I set my glass on a nearby table and smoothed the front of my dress. In the polished silver of a serving tray, my reflection looked calm, almost serene. The storm was already waiting, just behind the music. Dinner began with toasts and glittering glasses. The hall glowed with golden light, soft jazz curling through the air. I sat 2 tables away from the newlyweds, the hum of polite conversation surrounding me like static. Clara was radiant again, her laughter floating above everyone else's. Evan couldn't stop looking at her. For a moment, I almost wished I hadn't known what I knew. Then the lights dimmed. The DJ announced. A special surprise from the bride and groom's families. Applause followed. Forks clinking on china. I saw Tessa cross the room, quiet as a shadow, and stand near the control panel. The first images were harmless. Evan and Clara in Charleston, kissing beneath the oaks at White Point Garden, smiling by the harbor, holding hands over candlelight. The guests cooed. Sentimental. Clara's parents leaned close, proud. But then, mid-song, the footage flickered. A pause. The screen cut to a new image, grainier, colder. The images stuttered, then shifted time-stamped photos and hotel receipts from Savannah. Clara in a white sundress, arm-linked with a man in a gray suit street, and restaurant shots taken by a licensed private investigator, followed by the room charge that matched the same evening. A ripple of murmurs swept through the tables. Clara's smile froze. The video jumped again, different angles. Still her, the same man. Then photos followed. Taken discreetly, her hand on his shoulder at a restaurant. His at her waist. One last image appeared. Clara and the man entering a hotel room. The door closing behind them. The hall went silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector. Clara shot to her feet. "Turn it off!" she shrieked. "This is a mistake!" Her voice cracked through the quiet like breaking glass. Evan stood slowly, pale, eyes fixed on the screen. "Clara," he whispered, but the word barely left his mouth. Her father rushed forward, shouting at the staff. "Stop this! Who did this?" But Tessa stood near the control table, her hands steady. The video was password-locked, untouchable. Phones rose across the room. Flashes lit the scene like lightning. Clara's mother buried her face in her hands. Someone gasped when the footage faded to black. The screen froze on the final image, Evan and Clara's wedding date, written over the words, "True love never lies." I sat perfectly still. My hands folded in my lap. Across the room, Clara turned toward me, face white as marble, eyes full of disbelief and something else, fear. The truth had finally found her, and there was nowhere left to hide. For a few seconds after the screen went dark, no one moved. The silence was thick, the kind that hums in your ears. Then Evan turned toward Clara, his voice raw and trembling. "Tell me it's not true." Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. Around them, the crowd shifted, whispers rising like wind through dry leaves. Evan's voice broke again, louder this time. "Clara, tell me." She shook her head violently. "It's fake, all of it. Someone's trying to destroy me." Her eyes darted around the room until they landed on me. "You did this." I didn't move. The weight of every eye in the hall pressed down, but I stayed where I was, calm and still. Evan looked between us, his face pale. "You had months to tell me the truth," he said quietly. "Months." Clara's hand flew before anyone could stop her, a sharp crack that echoed across the hall. Evan's head snapped to the side. The sound was louder than the music that had stopped mid-note. Gasps filled the air. She stumbled back, realizing what she'd done, then turned toward the crowd. "You don't understand," she screamed. "He was nothing. It meant nothing. When a man near the front, an older guest, one of her sponsors tried to calm her. She shoved him hard. He fell backward, hitting a chair. Someone shouted for help. That was when the first phone camera flashed. Then another. Security rushed in. Clara's father grabbed her by the arms, hissing something I couldn't hear. Evan stood frozen, blood on his lip, disbelief in his eyes. Within minutes, the hall erupted, guests arguing, servers retreating, the air thick with panic and perfume. Police sirens echoed faintly from outside, drawing closer. By the time I stepped out into the Charleston night, the scene inside had already begun to spread online. The next morning, the headline read, "Charleston Wedding Scandal Designer's Affair and Meltdown Caught on Camera." By noon, Clara's social media accounts were locked. Sponsors pulled their contracts. Her company's website went offline. Perfection had cracked and everything she'd built collapsed with it. By Monday, Charleston had already turned my son's wedding into a cautionary tale. Headlines traveled faster than the summer heat, each version more colorful than the last. At the grocery store, people who used to greet me with polite smiles now avoided my eyes. A few whispered, anyway. I heard my name once, twice, followed by words like planned revenge, and poor Evan. I stopped answering the phone after the third call from a local reporter. Each time, their voices were the same, soft, curious, rehearsed. They wanted a quote, a comment, a headline that would keep the story alive another day. Evan hadn't called since the night of the wedding. I left messages, all short. Just checking on you. I love you. The last one was only silence before I hung up. His apartment was 10 minutes away, but I didn't drive there. Some distances can't be closed with a front door. At night, I sat at the small kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator keeping me company. I replayed the moment the screen went black, the sound of Clara's voice cracking. Evan's face when the truth reached him. People thought I'd done it for vengeance. They were wrong. I'd done it because I couldn't watch him walk into a life built on lies. Still, when I looked at my reflection in the dark window, I didn't see victory. I saw fatigue etched into the lines of my face, the kind that sleep doesn't erase. Outside, the cicadas buzzed, relentless in the heavy air. I switched off the light and sat in the dark a while longer, waiting for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe quiet, to finally arrive. 3 days passed before Evan finally called. His voice on the phone was distant, stripped of warmth. "We need to talk," he said. "Tomorrow morning, King Street Cafe." Then the line went dead. When I arrived, the cafe was nearly empty. Rain pressed softly against the windows, making the world outside blur. Evan was already there, sitting by the corner table. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness. He didn't stand when I came in. "Evan," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You were right," he said, "but you humiliated me." The words cut, but I didn't flinch. I sat across from him, my hands folded around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. "I didn't want it to happen that way," I said, "but I couldn't let her ruin your life." He shook his head slowly. "You should have told me." "I tried," I said. "Do you remember the texts I sent last spring? The ones you never answered?" He frowned. "Clara said you were being dramatic, that you didn't like her. She deleted the rest," I said softly. "Every message that mentioned Savannah, or that man. I only found out when I asked your carrier for the records." Evan leaned back, eyes glistening with disbelief. The silence between us filled with the clatter of dishes, the hum of espresso machines, the weight of everything unspoken. "I didn't want to expose her," I said. "I wanted to protect you." But she made it impossible. She turned every warning into proof that I was jealous or cruel. Evan rubbed his temples, his voice cracking. "I loved her, Mom. I know," I said. "And that's why I had to do it. Because love shouldn't be the thing that destroys you." For the first time in weeks, his shoulders eased, though his eyes stayed downcast. He didn't forgive me. Not yet. But he didn't leave either. And for now, that was enough. A week later, I was folding laundry when I heard the knock. It came sharp and fast, like someone who wanted to be heard more than welcomed. When I opened the door, Richard Monroe stood there, Clara's father, his tie loose, face flushed with anger. "You've ruined my daughter's life," he said without greeting. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I kept my hand on the doorframe. "She did that herself, Mr. Monroe. She made mistakes," he snapped. "But you destroyed her reputation. You think exposing her in front of everyone makes you noble?" The heat in his voice reminded me of every man who thought money could rewrite truth. I wanted to close the door, but I didn't. I looked him in the eye and said quietly, "I only showed what was already there." He glared a moment longer before turning away, muttering something about lawyers. His car peeled off down Wentworth Street, leaving tire marks on the wet pavement. That evening, as I watered the ferns on the porch, blue lights flashed 2 blocks away. Later, I'd learned that the police had arrived at Clara's downtown apartment. Someone in her company had come forward with evidence-forged vendor invoices, missing donations from a charity gala, payments rerouted into personal accounts. The investigation had begun months ago, quietly. Tessa's name appeared briefly in the local paper as a cooperating witness. Nothing sensational, just a footnote. But the connection was clear. The same folder I had given her, filled with timelines and receipts, had led detectives to the rest. By the next morning, Clara's mugshot was everywhere, on the news, on social media, on phones in every coffee shop in Charleston. The same flawless face that had graced wedding magazines now stared back, hollow-eyed under fluorescent light. Her company was suspended. Sponsors vanished overnight. I watched the coverage from my porch. The morning sun soft over the rooftops. Reporters called it the Charleston wedding scandal. Neighbors whispered again. But this time, their tones were quieter, almost reverent. The world had done what I no longer needed to do. Truth had finished what I'd started. I turned off the television, stepped outside, and let the warm wind from the harbor carry the sound of church bells through the air. For the first time in weeks, it didn't hurt to breathe. Spring came early that year. Charleston felt softer somehow. The air heavy with jasmine. The afternoons warm enough to sit outside without a sweater. I'd stopped checking the news by then. Clara's name had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals. Fresher faces. What remained were only quiet mornings and a house that finally felt still. When the knock came that evening, I knew it was him before I opened the door. Evan stood on the porch, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. He looked older, not in years, but in the way sorrow matures someone. "I brought your favorite," he said. Inside the box was cornbread, still warm. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd had since he was a boy, its edges worn smooth by years of Sunday breakfasts and late-night talks. I poured 2 glasses of sweet tea. The silence between us was careful, but not cold. After a long pause, Evan spoke. "You were wrong in how you did it," he said softly. "But you were right about her." I nodded. "I know." We ate quietly, the sound of cicadas rising outside the open window. Every few moments, I caught him looking around the room, the faded curtains, the old family photos, as if rediscovering something he'd forgotten belonged to him. When he finally stood to leave, he kissed the top of my head. "See you soon, Mom," he said, and it wasn't a promise or an apology, just truth. Later, as twilight folded over Rutledge Avenue, I watered the small garden by the fence. The magnolia tree rustled above, scattering white petals over the grass like forgiveness. "When love protects," I whispered. "It doesn't always look kind, but it always tells the truth." The night air carried the scent of magnolias, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like peace.